issues of concern to you, and it could be that.
Yeah, there's
committee.
flexibility for the
Right,
committee to
and
have, I'm
So
not
they can
saying,
come up with 4 or 5
Yeah.
things that, reflected a lot of the diversity of the particular board.
and to some degree, some consensus from the committee that they're all
Yeah.
comfortable with that is their response.
Well, Board of Review, though, is in charge of code enforcement, building codes, zoning codes.
Board of Appeals
Or, no, I'm sorry.
reviews the assessment.
Reviews
Yeah,
assessment,
yeah.
Board of Appeals
That's
is
true.
managing, pretty much everything that we're doing the study over, so they're,
Well, they hear appeals to what our code says.
They don't.
So
they
if
don't
someone doesn't
interpret-
conform,
but will our decision affect codes when it comes to the results of the survey? Will that be?
I think we're gonna get what you're looking for, from other, and from maybe other responses that, we're not unable to do this, or our constituency might be unable to do this because of the code. If you change the code, we could do X, Y, and Z, and so we're gonna get information on possible justification for any code changes, if that's what you're.
I see Dusty's point, which is that they kind of are the arm that sees the non-conforming parts of this and maybe have a perspective to lend in terms of the study. I mean, I think I'm having trouble putting it into words, but I do think that they might have a perspective that could be valuable here. I guess this is not. I can see both ways here, but if it's just a kind of send them a survey and see what their thoughts are, I wouldn't mind having them weigh in as well. I don't want to sidetrack us for an hour on the discussion, but I see the point.
the only difference is that we'd actually need to convene them for the meeting. So right now, they only convene
If they have an application
if they have an
to review.
application.
But do they make recommendation on rule changes, or they just enforce whatever the rules are and look at an application and see whether or not it meets the rules, or?
They don't make formal recommendations, but if they've seen, the same variance request 3 or 4 times,
Sure.
it's kind of a red flag for all of us to consider changing the code then.
Is there another way to gather that information? That type of example where you see 3 different, is that documented where we could actually?
Yeah,
gather
that's something that staff could review, like the
Yeah,
past 2 to 5 years of minutes and just document what
yeah.
variance requests they've been receiving. Most of them are gonna be setbacks and fences, things like that. So we could document those types of requests. It's mostly gonna be residential, neighbor to neighbor kind of things, which might be useful for the housing study, quite
Right,
honestly.
yep.
But strategic planning, I don't know if they're gonna be large.
If I understand this correctly, the kind of things that they're reviewing, they don't really have an impact on housing. I mean, whether someone's fence is 4 feet or 6 feet, that doesn't affect.
Unless our code is so poorly written that it should change. But yeah, typically they're looking at, site circumstances that say why that person can't have a 3-foot setback or things like
Right.
that. It's more.
But those are very,
hardships.
they're very specific to
Correct.
particular properties and
Mhm.
situations. They're not,
And they're supposed
if
to.
I
Correct.
understand,
Absolutely
it's
correct.
not, they're not coming to that entity saying, I wanna convert my house to a rooming house, or things like that, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so,
That's a good point.
they're not really
It's
higher arching housing and economic development things. It's like,
I mean, I think,
What are we hoping to come out at the end of the study with?
Priorities that the CDA and the village board, agree on in a priority order, so that we can take that and develop a policy that can be reflective, we can use.
So like
And work on
saying we
development.
want a low-income housing or
Correct.
low-income housing, senior
Correct.
housing, larger, louder, okay.
Mhm.
So I guess then, who we're, so this is our step of getting input into that,
yes, from the stakeholders that,
we identified.
yeah, which I think is another question, is whether we have you know, is this list inclusive of all the stakeholders that we want?
Yeah, I mean, I just say it's sometimes useful to think, okay, where do we wanna end up, and are we
Mhm.
doing the right thing to get to where we
Yep.
wanna end up?
And I think, you know, to some degree, we're trying to obtain the community's feedback through the committees that represent various stakeholders and people in the community, without going out to the whole community to try and do that.
Well, we already did, and we asked a number of questions that do reflect community sentiment within the 2019 survey, which is kind of like a first step. We don't do that every year, we don't do it every third year. So that, I mean, compiled with then this more specific stakeholder group of our committees, who was specifically asked to be tapped into.
Okay.
I mean, I just don't, yeah, I guess I mean, my personally is, I would say let's just have everybody do it, but fill out the survey, cause I think more is gonna be better, but it's not gonna be it's not like there are questions with A, B, C, D answer that you can then collate and compile some numbers like the community survey, you know,
Yeah.
it's more of a qualitative survey.
Yes.
Yeah, because if we include everyone involved in all
Yeah.
17 of these, how many people is that?
150.
Yeah, that's a ton.
That's a tiny.
Which is, I mean, it's a
population.
but from an open-ended essay type question answer survey, that's a lot of stuff to go through.
I know, but I'm just saying if we as board members, or even at the CDA, if we say, okay, our number one priority is gonna be, you know, granny units or whatever, you know, there's probably gonna be somebody who's gonna come up to you and say, where the hell did you get that? And you wanna be able to say, we went through this process, and so,
Yeah.
you know.
You'd have to call the Board of Appeals together to get a decision on
Yeah,
If they would want to
well,
provide
there's
one.
only
So
a few
committees
people,
have an option.
So
there's
They,
only
yeah.
a few of them,
they
right?
can
And you
say,
just give it to
yes, we'd
them.
like to provide some advisement, or no, we're okay, they're
Yeah.
fine.
I know. I mean, what, is there like 3 of them or 5 of them with the alternates? I mean, you could just, I don't know, I would err on more rather than less,
Sure,
but.
I mean, I think we can certainly ask, yeah, that's fine.
I think if it's voluntary essentially, then let's
Yeah,
just
we're-
include
Yep,
it.
yep,
Yeah, we'll probably only
Right.
get half people filling it out anyhow. But yeah, I just wanna, I mean, we are hitting, I mean, we have elder services, we have the schools for like, maybe like, I don't know, I was gonna say PTO. Families with kids, I mean, so the school board is representing families with kids.
right.
This,
it.
I don't, okay.
Are you saying that's inclusive?
I'm just saying, I'm just looking at like
Where are we
what
missing?
constituencies are really being
Missing.
represented here.
Or even the other way, which ones are missing?
Which ones are we missing? Yeah, and I mean, I like the HRC is here because I think there's quite a large contingency of people who rent, who are not represented or involved in
Yep.
any of
Yeah.
these,
Yep.
you know, or people who wanna buy but can't afford it, I don't know. Department heads and key staff, what does that mean? Who are key staff other than department head?
For example, Diane, deputy clerk, or Elizabeth from Senior Resource Center.
But you would all still be one response from that entire group.
Right, if that's the direction from the group, yep.
Right, I mean,
Would it-
I just wanna make sure we're, you know, cause, yeah.
Could we make it, I see a lot of value in Peter saying from a analysis standpoint and getting this done in a reasonable time frame. Maybe, does it make sense to have, they can do it either way? So you can elect, as your body, you can submit one form, but if you decide that the 3 people on this committee wanna submit their own individual ones, that they could do that too? Does that,
Yeah,
Makes
I like
sense.
that, like, I think we should ask everybody to do it, but then if an individual wants to do it also.
yeah, rather than making a requirement that we only want one response,
Yeah.
like, maybe we say we prefer one response, but if you feel like for whatever
If
reason.
you can't come to agreement?
If you can't come to agreement, or
If you wanted to
if something I'm
know.
not thinking of, for some reason, one of these bodies, it makes more sense for the 3 people to answer individually, then they do that.
I really like that idea. The next place I was gonna go is if we have the committees just submit one, we're gonna have to provide some guidelines of process, because if I looked at this as a committee of 15, I'd be like, there's no way we'd get through this within a reasonable timeframe. So I think that if we don't give that option, we'd have to provide some, maybe the chairperson fills it out and brings it back, or, I just think I think process-wise, unless the committees are really on the same page in terms of what they're thinking, it could get very complicated and time-consuming. So I like the idea of.
That was kind of my initial thought, was even just for this group, I mean, we could spend 3 meetings on this.
I mean,
I mean, unless we, like you said, I mean, I know we've discussed all this stuff, and I have a pretty good sense of where we probably would answer these things, so maybe one person would take the lead, that's probably how I would proceed with this group. But I don't know,
But again,
I don't know
this
how
could be
these
all
other
get
groups
to
work,
Again, given the importance of this to us, and this is driving what we are doing in the village board, we are all answering individually for this.
Oh, that's right, we,
But wearing,
Okay.
again, to me,
okay,
the key is you're wearing your committee hat when you're responding to this.
I think we should ask each group, and then if individuals want to
Feel-
submit one individually, they can.
If you feel,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, our request is for a response from the committee, but if
Yeah.
any one of the committee members feels strongly enough that, again,
that's a
wearing
good
their
way to
committee
do it,
hat.
cause then if there is an outlier in the
Yes,
group for
we're
whatever
hearing
reason, and
from
they
them.
feel like
Yeah.
their voice isn't being
Yes.
heard,
Yeah.
Fair enough.
they are not restricted from
Yes.
sending it in, because we wouldn't want, because then we're not really being
Then we're
inclusive.
defeating the whole purpose of
Well, and
reaching
I
out to
think too,
everyone.
Right.
like looking at, like for conservation to look at this, or even HRC, I mean, there's a lot in here, there's a lot that they are thinking about or would wanna say, I mean, it's just a whole different lens on it
Yes, it
than we
is.
have, and
Yep,
so.
which is part of why I think that's the valuable information that we'll get back,
Yeah.
is the different lens.
Right, but what John was saying about, I mean, they could spend 3 meetings, working on it.
Well, then we have to have a timeline.
Which we
Yeah,
will,
yeah.
yep.
That's all there is to
They
it.
would have one meeting.
But again, you try to be inclusive, that means there's work involved, I mean,
Yeah.
you try to get to a good place, it requires work, it requires thought, so that's that.
I mean,
So,
we'll have
but
to
I'm,
change how it's written
Yeah. Yes, yep.
okay, so we will,
Can you read, can you, Kat,
Yes,
just to make sure
yes.
that I heard you correctly?
yep,
Because I don't wanna miss it
no, I,
in translation. So, we would prefer that committees to collectively, meet and provide one response. However, if they're unable to do so for a reason, that they are able to submit individually.
yeah, I think
Is
it's,
that where-
our request is one response per committee based on the committee's charter and responsibilities to the community.
Okay.
If any committee member feels strongly that they need to provide additional or, other feedback besides the response from the committee, we are more than willing to accept that as well. I think it's basically the same thing you said, but
No,
And honestly, I could see maybe there's 2 questions that a committee,
yeah,
and
can't,
so maybe they actually create a separate paragraph, so John Smith disagrees with
Yes.
this, what was above and thinks this, like, they
Make a
could just.
dissenting opinion.
Right, almost, yeah, on a particular question, it could just be, because maybe it's not all how many questions, it's just 1 or 2 that are sticking points or
so
something.
again, in the end, I think the
So-
goal,
That could be done within that context
Yeah.
as well. And then we get that information, it's there.
is that clear? Yes, okay.
Would it, just occurring to me, Shorewood moving forward might be what do you think, or I don't know if this would be of interest to them, I don't know, I just throw it out there.
I mean, I see no, I think I'd like to include them they've been very active in the village and kind of village issues over the last year and a half. If we don't mind also pulling in some outside groups who aren't necessarily village sponsored, I think they'd be a really good group to start with. And I think they meet monthly.
Yeah,
Sorry, what's their,
Shorewood moving forward, they're basically around issues of equity and inclusion and, kind of grew out of To Kill a Mockingbird and
Mm.
things that we could do to,
Yes.
within mostly the schools, but also just the village generally. I mean, they're kind of like the HRC, but, more of a grassroots organization, so they have a little different perspective on things.
And they meet they have a regular cadence for meetings, they're an active group, so I don't anticipate problems with actually getting someone in a cross-section of people actually to fill it out, so.
They're not a formal sort of
No.
committee or, so they would be the one group we'd be reaching out to that's not kind of a formal village.
Well, our,
I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but are there, if we went down that path, are there other,
There could be.
But, I mean, would we have a problem though if other groups around the community said, well, we wanna fill this out too? And I guess we don't wanna
I don't-
drag the timeline out, but.
yeah, I
As long
think
as they
assuming
meet
the
the
timelines.
timeline,
And again, I think we're putting more onus on the consultants to
oh,
gather, compile the data, right? I mean,
I guess I
I
just.
wanna be inclusive. That's, to me, a goal, but again, the double-edged sword of that is there's still a line that needs to be drawn somewhere that says this is the group that these other groups are reaching out to. So I think that's,
I guess these are probably famous last words, but I just can't, I don't see a lot of groups stepping forward and saying, no, I wanna be included too. I would guess that it would be, you know, maybe we get a couple more, but even if we start to include outside groups, I would think we'd get some valuable input, and I don't think we'd create this waterfall effect, but again, I could be completely in the wrong there, so.
I mean, I can't really think of other,
that's what I was gonna ask, are there other?
well, the foundation is on here though, and they're not a village group.
Oh,
So
The Historical
this-
Society is not a village group.
this
yeah,
what,
so anyway,
this list came from, actually our committee rosters in terms of formalized committees that we've established, and then those that we've considered in the past affiliated in some way, and so that's where that came from.